let's move on to some player of the year and like breakout player of the year, stuff like that. So let's do offensive player of the year, defensive player of the year, and then breakout player of the year. So let's go offensive player of the year first. I'll go first with mine, and then we'll move over to Jeff. So my offensive player of the year, I have three selections here. I have my like most obvious one. I have my one that's like, I think this has a likelihood of happening, but I don't know if I see it happening. I want to see it happen first. And then my other one is like, I don't think this will happen, but it's kind of a wild card that it could possibly happen. My offensive player of the year, I have Jeremiah Smith. I think he's got the hype, everything else, unless he, completely falls off. I think he wins it. I think if Penn State has a really good season, goes 12-0, wins the Big Ten, I think he probably wins Offensive Player of the Year. And then my kind of like wild cardy one, like could possibly do it, but I don't know if they would actually give it to him or not. Would be Jayden Maiava, USC quarterback. So, but I think he could have a good enough season, even if they only go 9-3 or something like that. I think he could have a good enough season. They would give it to him, or like a Dylan Raiola, somebody like that.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Jeff, who you got?
Yeah, I would just say that Jeremiah Smith might be obvious, but so many Ohio State players have won this award. We probably could check that out. It's really amazing, and probably not surprising to people how prolific they've been offensively. But I'm looking at a little out of the box here. I did a podcast, May 22nd podcast on projecting all the Big Ten passers in their passer ratings, and number one was Drew Aller, but I don't think he's going to win it. So number two, though, was Indiana quarterback Fernando Mendoza. I'm going with him as Offensive Player of the Year. I had projected 3,042 yards passing, 23 TDs, 8 INTs, 69% completion percent. And like I said, having the second best rating in the conference. It's not going to go to a running back. It's just too hard to happen. And typically a quarterback is winning these type of awards more and more, kind of like the Heisman, right?
Yeah.
It's becoming a quarterback award. So I'm going with Fernando Mendoza.
Good pick. Zach?
So I have Fernando Mendoza as my number 2. I have Jeremiah Smith as my number 3. My number 1 is actually a running back.
Zach is just not agreeing with any of us tonight.
No,
okay.
No. Well, but I agree in general that I think it's hard for a running back to win.
Unless, not impossible.
Unless if you specifically design things. And I think Nicholas Singleton is a running back in an offense that could be utilized in a way where he is running, passing, and maybe even throwing. So I have Nicholas Singleton as the best player, the best offensive player on the best team in the Big Ten.
So my pushback on that would be just like last year with Travion Henderson and Judkins. Just split the stats being split between those two, and therefore, one of them not being the bell cow and the stats they need to win this award.
Yeah, and I thought about that, and I think, and I could be completely wrong on this. I wonder if Singleton becomes like the Tyler Warren this year, and maybe that's too much guesswork. But I just think Kotelnicki likes to design plays for his best players. And like Kaytron Allen is a really good player. Like I don't want to take anything away from him. But I just there's another gear with Singleton. So but but I think you're right, Jeff. Like I think if they split carries too much, I think Mendoza and Smith are probably my 1 and 2. But
I think for me the difference for me with Singleton and Allen and Henderson and Judkins is that Singleton and Allen both have the opportunity to break the career rushing record for Penn State. And I think if you get that record, that gives you a little bit extra juice. And then the award not only is for the season, but it's also kind of like a career award as well, too.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So.
And the Big Ten loves their career awards.
They do.
Legends and leaders, right?
Yeah, just go and put Nicholas Singleton in the Legends and Leaders thing. Yeah, that'd be great. Okay, let's do defensive player. Oh, where do you go? There it is. Defensive player of the year. Jeff, I'll let you start on this one. Who you got for this one?
So this one is the hardest award to predict because it can come from many different positions. But really, it needs to come up from a team that has lots of big games on big stages. I'm just keeping it simple. I'm going with the best defensive player that many think is in college football and the best NFL prospect in the Big Ten on the defensive side. Ohio State safety Caleb Downs. It also helps that he's going to return some punts, probably. I mean, I'm thinking he might. That could add to his value. So just Caleb Downs is my pick.
Ditto. I think you said it quite excellently, Jeff. I think it's Caleb Downs. I will give two dark horses, though, and they're not really dark horses. I think Mateo Uyunglele, if they just let him loose as a pass rusher.
Yep.
And then the other one who's a pass rusher, and this is like big time dark horse, Kenyatta Jackson. I know there's a lot, like there's Gabe Yakis, there's Mikel Kamara. There's a lot of hype for Kenyatta Jackson right now. And if you have a pass rusher out of Ohio State who gets double-digit sacks, it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard to ignore them.
I was going to say, Zach, if you went with him, why wasn't he your breakout player of the year? Maybe he is that as well then.
I was gonna say, that sounds like more of a breakout player of the year type of candidate than a defensive player.
But a breakout player could win the defensive player of the year too.
It's true.
Yeah. I do have a different breakout player, but yeah.
Jake, it's no secret I do love Eric Gentry. That has been well documented on here before. Unfortunately, I just don't know if a linebacker, unless they have a Jay Higgins type season where they have just like over 100 tackles and all that stuff, I don't know if they're gonna. And that's kind of, I mean, I'm not gonna say that. I'm gonna make the Iowa fans mad. But I don't know if I see a linebacker winning the award, unless there is like some kind of like career milestone that goes with it, or just like some outstanding tackle amount or something.
You're going to have to get some turnovers, like some interceptions among their stats.
But rest assured, I do love me some Eric Gentry. So let that be known. Okay. Defensive player of the year, I had Coy Parrish. If he has the same type of interception stuff, if he's playing both sides of the ball, I think he's going to get close to winning that award, if not winning it. Caleb Downs in there as well. I don't think Caleb Downs will really have the stats because he's not like that roaming free safety that's going to get you 6, 7, 8 interceptions. But I do think he's going to be recognized for very good play. And then the other ones are like your standard kind of edge rushers, that one of these guys is just going to have a crazy amount of sacks this season, whether it's Gabe Yakis, Mikel Kamara, Mateo Uyunglele, Derek Moore, somebody at Ohio State like a Kenyatta Jackson. I'm probably missing somebody, and I'm going to hear about it from their fans in the chat. Dennis Sutton, right? Like some kind of edge rusher that just completely goes off and gets a crazy amount of sacks would probably be the one that would win that somewhere in there. And sometimes it just depends on how good the coverage is behind them, because all these guys are going to get to the quarterback, but not all of them are going to have good enough coverage behind them to give them the opportunity to get there. So my safe pick here will be Coy Parrish, but there's a litany of edge rushers in this conference that if they have a good enough pass defense behind them, they're going to rack up 10, 11, 12, 13 sacks this season and get considered for it. So
nice.
All right. Zach, we'll let you start with the breakout player of the year. Is it Kenyatta Jackson?
It's not, although he's definitely, he would, if he does what I think he's going to do, he would definitely qualify. Okay. But the guy, and I think we've talked about him before, I think Damon Williams at Washington is going to be
great pick. Yeah.
I think he is going to have a stellar season. And I think that's why many of us are high on Washington this year, is I think he's going to be a true dual threat guy who has a lot of stats, maybe threatened for offensive player of the year. But I think everybody will know who Damon Williams is by the end of the season.
That's a great pick. Great pick. Jeff, who you got?
That's a great pick. There's good candidates, but this one was easy for me. junior running back Justice Haynes from Michigan.
Mm.
Now, I'm a little biased. He is from Alpharetta, Georgia. That's where I live. And he actually started in high school at Blessed Trinity, which is in my son's, who plays football, region. So we're going to play Blessed Trinity, unfortunately, the second to last game of the season, and they're loaded with Division I talent. But then he transferred to Buford High School, which was, big national power. That's where Dylan Raiola went. I watched him in the Georgia playoffs. I mean, he is just a special back. Had a good year at Bama last year, about 450 yards rushing, 5.7 yards per carry. And he's just perfect for Michigan. They have a young quarterback in Underwood. Michigan wants to run. They're going to double down on running with given that Underwood's young, and they're going to roll out Underwood some and run him some as well. But I expect Haynes to go for 1,000 plus and really be a big viable candidate to win this breakout player of the year.
That's interesting you say that, Jeff, because my breakout player of the year, or one of them, is Jordan Marshall.
Yeah. I think Haynes is better. He's better.
No, I don't know which one is better. Marshall flashed in the game against Alabama. Haynes was a backup at Alabama, but he definitely flashed in some of the carries that he got there as well. So I think it's appropriate to say one of these two Michigan running backs has a very, very good chance of being the breakout player of the year. Damon Williams is a great choice. Dylan Raiola is another great option. Aiden Childs, like you talked about with your sleeper possible sleeper pick there, Jeff, about Michigan State, if this offense really lights things up with Michigan State this season, that could be a good possibility for the breakout player of the year if he fixes up those turnovers, and he has a really good wide receiver core as well.
He has a one.
If that offensive line gives him time, he could be the breakout player of the year as well. So I think one of the Michigan running backs, either Haynes or Marshall, Raiola, Williams. I don't think I'm forgetting anybody. Childs. I don't think Fernando Mendoza would get it. Fernando Mendoza's getting like first round type of thoughts right now and in grades. So I don't think he would be a candidate for breakout player of the year. But I think some people might think that because there are some people out there that just don't recognize how good Fernando Mendoza.
And I wonder if Raiola would fall in that bucket too, even though he didn't have a great year, but it's almost like he's kind of expected to be really better. And Dara, I do agree on Michigan, but this is dependent for Michigan on that line being much better than last year. If that offensive line is not significantly better, it doesn't matter how good these guys are. They're not going to have.
We talked about it last Tuesday. Sharon Moore came out and said that the offensive line for Michigan is pushing the defensive line more. And as we know, the defensive line is one of the biggest strengths for this Michigan team. So if the offensive line is holding their own against that defensive line for Michigan, then that seems to bode good news for the Michigan fans and their team. But as with most things, and I don't just say that about Michigan, I say it about pretty much every team. We'll see when they start playing the games. That's kind of for sure how it goes.
We'll find out how good that Michigan offensive line is against Oklahoma. I'll tell you that.
That's true. Yeah, Oklahoma has a very good defensive line. So
yeah, that's true. One more potential breakout player that I'll throw out there: Hudson Clement out of Illinois. They need someone to step up at receiver with losing Zachary Franklin and Pat Bryant. There is a lot of excitement. If you heard Luke Altmaier at Media Days, he talked about the loss of Pat Bryant and Zachary Franklin and how that would hurt. But then he got a big grin about the talent they have in that receiver room. So we talked about it a little bit last show. Just that there is a lot of rotation, but I think Hudson Clement's going to be one of those guys that really does break out this season.
I think Hudson Clement is going to rack up the yards and be a very good option for him. I'm interested to see who that guy is that is kind of like the star wide receiver, right? Who is the guy that is the third down option? They consistently go to him, get the ball out to him. I don't know if he'll necessarily have the yards and stuff like that of a Hudson Clement, but I think he'll kind of get the recognition of being like that reliable guy. I was hesitant to pick an Illinois wide receiver just because there's so many. It sounds like there's so many good ones in there, but we just don't know which one will be the star guy, right? It's kind of an interesting situation, but good pick. I've been high on the Hudson Clement train as well.